Hello everyone. GZTV back with another video. And in this video, we are going to be talking about the 14th episode of season 5 of Breaking Bad, the third to last episode. My god, I can't believe I finished this. But we're just going to be talking up to the point of episode 14. Then we're going to talk about Better Call Saul. Then, I'm on the second episode. Then I'm going to be playing for some Far Cry. And then who knows. Yeah. We go through the plot. We kind of talk about what people thought of this episode. We talk about what I thought of the episode. And honestly, let me just spoil you guys in real quick. This is probably the best show, and I think the general audience can agree, this is probably the best, or the best episode on Breaking Bad, the best show. Maybe that was what I was trying to say. Okay. But anyways, we're going to be talking kind of like the plot here. There's a flashback that happens, and obviously flashbacks are very popular in this show. So, Walt and Jesse conduct their first meth cook, which is very, very memorable moment for these two starting off their careers in the business. It's really emotional watching this flashback. I mean, I really missed the naive Walter. I think before Heisenberg, you could argue that the normal Walter White, just getting started in meth, was the best part of his character, because he had no idea what he was. He knew what he was doing cooking wise, but he had no idea what he was doing business wise. He had no idea how to deal with people. And yeah, it was just a great moment. I kind of want to rewatch the show just so I can, regain that naivete, as Walter White actually said in the show once, that Walter White possessed before he became Heisenberg. The second he bombed Tuco's office, that's when he lost his naivety. You know what I mean? That is the second he became Heisenberg. Walt calls pregnant Skyler with an excuse for not being home, and she suggests the name Holly for their baby. So yeah, at this point, Skyler just got pregnant. They just found out it was a girl, and they're naming the baby Holly. And obviously, fast forward to today, and you have the baby Holly. And maybe this foreshadows a little bit, because Holly will play a pretty decently big role in the story for this episode. I think here. So, Walt, he was working at the car wash for that angry Indian dude, Bogdan. And he was like, he's got a fly up his butt. It was kind of weird. It was kind of an awkward phone call, but yeah, he kind of tells Skyler that. And then everything kind of disappeared. The reckoning on here of pretty much like a time lapse of the trailer, Jesse and Walt disappearing, and then we get to the main story here, and we have the cars of everyone involved in this shootout that happened last episode. So now we're here to figure out what happened in the shootout. Anyone die and stuff like that. So in the main story, Hank is wounded following the shootout with Jack's Brotherhood, and Steve Gomez is dead, but Jack and his gang are unscathed. Man, I don't know, man. Steve Gomez dying, that leaves kind of a bad taste in your mouth, because he wasn't even the one heading this investigation. He wasn't even the one going after Heisenberg. He was kind of a naive dude, and then he just gets shot in the shootout. Probably didn't even expect these guys to roll up on them like that. Yeah, it sucks. I feel bad for Gomez, really. Jack prepares to kill Hank, and Walt begs Jack to spare him, offering his entire $80 million fortune in exchange. I mean, I know Hank is family, but realistically, Walter, is Hank worth $80 million? I'm not quite sure about that. I don't know. Hank chides Walt for not understanding Jack is going to kill him anyway, and accepts his death. Jack shoots and kills Hank, and Walt collapses to the ground in despair. Kind of where you got that meme, that famous shot of Walt, eyes, mouth open, kind of like that. I can't really replicate it that well, but he's falling on his knees. He's very devastated. He got pretty much an innocent man killed. Technically, Jesse kind of helped out with getting Hank killed a little bit. Bringing him out to this location where shit is bound to go down soon. Do I feel bad for Hank? Yes. But he was very nosy. He was very... that shows his dedication as a DEA officer, obviously. Walter did. things wrong, but if Hank didn't die, Walter would be in trouble, Todd would be in trouble, Jack would be in trouble, Jesse would be in trouble. This whole situation would collapse. This whole business would collapse. And not that Walt was going back anyway, but his money would have been taken away. So the gang discovers and steals 6 of Walt's money barrels. At Todd's request, they leave the 7th for Walt. Very nice of Todd. That is like the one good gesture he makes throughout this entire show. You know, leave a barrel behind for Walter. Obviously, it's his fucking money. You gotta have mercy on the guy. I think a poem that the show's title was based on was Ozymandias, and it talks about kind of mercy. And, like, Todd shows a lot of mercy here. He's like, look, I mean, Walter probably doesn't need $80 million, but $10 million, like, taking all $80 million, like, he needs the $10 million. He needs that for the rest of his life. And so they leave the money behind. I think that's a great job for Todd. The gang buries Hank and Gomez in place of the barrels. Oh, man, that is just cold-hearted shit right there. You know, Walt, looking back on the scene where he's digging the graves for Hank and Gomez. Like, I don't think that's really a foreshadowing, but the fact that Hank and Gomez are kind of buried in the same hole that he had his money in, oh, man. He chose money over family. That's like a big representation, a big symbolic meaning there, and I love it. Walt identifies Jesse's hiding place and demands Jack carry out and hit Walt previously requested. Now he's like infuriated. At this point, he's like, "What the fuck? You guys killed Hank. You might as well take out Jesse as well." Todd suggests taking Jesse captive because he might be useful later in terms of cooking, and yes, he will. Spoiler alert: he will be a big part of their cook. Walt spitefully reveals to Jesse that he allowed Jane to die. So kind of a big confessional piece for Walter there, telling Jesse, look, I watched Jane die. Are you even more mad at me now? I mean, he's just kind of rubbing shit in his face, being the savage Heisenberg that's shown himself all throughout the series. The gang detains Jesse in a cell, then forces him to cook meth. Because obviously he's a better cook than Todd. He's been around with Walter longer. So Walt's car runs out of fuel because a bullet has punctured the tank. Now Walt is like hit rock bottom. This is like the lowest points for Walter. He's almost in a spot that Jesse was in where he couldn't get to the RV and he was like in the porta potty. It's almost like that, like the script is kind of flipped on Walter. And although Jesse's in a bad place, at least he's not in trouble or anything. He doesn't have family to worry about as much. His mom and dad really don't come in until the El Camino movie, by the way. So he rolls his barrel through the desert until he reaches a house and purchases the owner's truck. It's like this Indian guy, you know, they're on the Tohle Indian reservation, and he's like, I'm going to buy your truck. He gives him like $50,000, which was well worth it, because he can get home now. Unaware of what has transpired in the desert, Marie informs Skyler that Hank has arrested Walt. Kind of celebratory, kind of haha, told you so, rub it in her face, which very toxic of Marie, but I guess deserving. You know, Skyler hid so many things from her for so long. She doesn't know what happened to Hank, though. And the whites are going to get the last laugh, but at what cost at the end? She demands that Skyler relinquish the false confession video implicating Hank and tell Walt Jr. the truth. So they're like, wow, maybe at this point we should tell Walt Jr. the truth. And I mean, honesty is great, but I don't think at this point you should really tell Walter Jr. Ah, man, I think if they didn't tell Walt Jr. things, some of the shit that happened in this episode that were very tragic wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? I don't know. Now that I think about it, there's like a chain of events that really led to the tragic, like, family conflict that we see towards the end of the episode. Skyler informs Walt Jr. about Walt's drug business, and he tells her she is as bad as Walt for going along. So they actually tell Walt Jr., I'm like, why did you do that? The kid was living such a peaceful childhood. He was very suspicious. He had his suspicions. He's like, Dad, stop lying. Tell me the truth. But if you didn't have to tell him anything, really. Um, Arriving home, Walt frantically tries to get Skylar and Walt Jr. to leave with him. So as you guys know, if you've already seen this episode, he's going to pretty much see the disappearer. He's trying to get his name out of the air, and kind of disappear for the rest of his life, which is probably a good idea. Skylar's realization that Hank is dead causes an altercation, and Walt Jr. contacts the police. So they called the police because Walt possibly killed Hank, and obviously he didn't. That was Jack and the Nazis. So Walt is the one time that Walt is like put at high blame for a criminal action, he didn't even do it. He didn't kill Hank, and Skylar starts a fight with a knife. I mean, my God. And they call the police. Walt kind of gets slashed in the hand by Skylar, and then Walt kidnaps Holly and leaves. And, pretty soon Walt will find out that's very immoral of him. One of the more immoral things he's done. Even more immoral than some of the kills he's had. Some of the kills he's gotten in this series. Walt feels guilty when Holly calls out for her mother, realizing that she has a very emotional connection to her mother, and he can't just let that ruin a baby. It's a baby we're talking about here. I mean, the younger the victim is, the more remorse they're going to feel. I mean, look at the Drew kid getting killed. Jesse, broke down in tears. He's like, what the fuck are you doing? Why would you do that? The kid has so much life ahead of him. That kind of thing. So Marie and the police arrive at the Whites' home. The police tap the home phone and attempt to brace it when Walt calls. Walt attempts to establish Skylar's innocence by berating her and falsely claiming he built up his drug business alone. That's very selfish of Walter, because when you first watch it, you're like, yeah, you did it by yourself. You really want to believe this guy. But then you think about Jesse Pinkman, the street smarts behind the whole operation. That was a plane. Jesse, the street smarts behind the operation, the guy that's had experiences in the business. So Walter is just lying to be selfish and be arrogant, and I don't know. There's a couple things Walter does in this episode. It's probably the most hated Walter has been in an episode, in my opinion. I don't think even killing Jane and letting her die was as hateful as this stuff. So Walt confirms Hank's death. He's like, yeah, Hank's dead. I didn't do it, though. He didn't say that, but he leaves Holly at a fire station with her home address written on a note, so he wants other people to bring her back so he doesn't have to and deal with the police. So him just kind of being irresponsible for his actions. The next morning, Walt meets Saul's new identity contact, who drives away with Walt and the barrel. That's the cliffhanger, and Walt leaves town. So, yeah. This episode received universal critical acclaim, widely considered the show's best episode, one of the best shows in the history of television. Multiple people called it the best episode of 2013, or maybe even of the decade. TV Guide picked Ozymandias as the best television episode of the 21st century. Ozymandias frequently topped polls of the best Breaking Bad episodes. 6.4 million people watched it, the most for an episode at the time. Revered among fans. As of this year, it is rated a 10 out of 10 on IMDb. It has held a perfect 10 out of 10 score on the website with only a brief interruption between January 2021 and March 2022. The episode paid off the season's build-off, and it was great that it did that. A lot of people said pretty similar things about this. It's a great episode, of course. It's as rich, and I like how it made Skylar's arc as a victim to willing accomplice worth it, which she felt had previously been a fault. It's been a fault of the season that Skylar's arc hasn't been focused on as much, but I think this episode did great at that. The episode delivered on each member of the White family's arcs very well. It actualized the consequences of Walt's actions and what she saw. It's a visceral manner. It was a culmination of the show to that point, and it was great. Some people found it hard to watch. Some people called the episode perfectly realized, left people feeling sick, made them want to cry. Very understandable. A lot of family conflicts that are very emotional in this. The episode's terrific and awful to watch, a powerful piece of television that transcended fiction. Relief that the show is ending. The show's honesty about greed and violence was unbearable. People were happy the show is ending, and that's probably why the show is ending, because you can only take so much, I guess. The script and the direction is beautiful, exquisite. The direction was immersive. Johnson served the script by keeping the stylization at a minimum and letting the emotional scenes carry through with the power that was clearly on the page. The best working director in television. Johnson got his name because of his work on this episode. There's very limited criticism. Todd's request to spare Walt and his delay, the letter to be heavy-handed and unsettled, but acknowledging that it did work within the story. Like, Todd letting people live and stuff was very, very, like, weird to people. I understand that. Justice Survival was improbable by most. Walt revealing his entire fortune and his eventual new life to be out of character decisions, the gang's imprisonment of Jesse to continue selling meth, and lack of infighting also, like, perplexed people, I guess. But I don't really have much to say. That episode's a masterpiece. So much happens. You're like, wow, these big storylines both happened, like with Walt's family and with Hank dying. Both of these things happen in the same episode, and it's a beautiful thing. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. As always, it is GZTV giving you guys the best TV shows out there and reviewing them for you. We got Better Call Saul coming up next, just starting that series,